But first, a major update in the shooting death of Alton Sterling. We're learning new information about search warrants that were issued by the Baton Rouge police for surveillance video that may have captured Sterling's deadly encounter with police. David Begnaud is outside police headquarters in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And David, what is the very latest and what's the potential significance of this new information?
Elaine, a couple of things here. First of all, the man who owns the store where the shooting took place is suing because he has a problem with how his video surveillance system was taken from him. When the shooting was reported, the store owner was put in the back of a police car, and he tells us that the police came up to him and said, "We're going to take your surveillance system because we have a warrant." He alleges that there is no warrant and the police had no right to take the surveillance system. Why is that important? Because we're told 2 cameras in the front of the store actually captured the shooting, but not only that, captured the initial interaction that the officers had with Alton Sterling when they first arrived. That initial confrontation is going to be critical, according to law enforcement sources. Also, what we learned today, an affidavit was filed with the court revealing what officers told investigators after the shooting, which was when they initially encountered Mr. Sterling, they spotted what the officers said was the butt of a weapon in his front pants pocket. Mr. Sterling's front pants pocket, we're told there was a butt of a gun. That's according to the search warrant. When they spotted that gun, the officer who fired the lethal rounds says that he saw Mr. Sterling reach for the weapon, and that's when he opened fire. This is critical because we've not heard anything from the officers. Elaine, so far, no attorney, not the police union, no one has spoken out on behalf of these officers.
David, you spoke with the Baton Rouge police chief. It was his first interview since the Alton Sterling shooting. What did he tell you?
Well, we wanted to get his reaction to what happened last night in downtown Baton Rouge. My crew and I were there as riot police confronted protesters who were standing in the middle of the street and refused to leave. And they were told repeatedly for more than an hour, you need to get off of the street. You are standing in the street illegally. Please disperse. They didn't. At one point, the riot police moved into the front yard of a woman and arrested protesters on her private property. Now, the woman had given the protesters approval and permission to be in her front yard. So we asked the chief, why did that happen? The woman said she was really disappointed in how it was handled. Here's what the chief had to say.
You have to take in consideration prior to all of that happening, there had been a violent protest. I mean, there were rocks and bricks and things thrown at the officers. When we do things like this, it's all about safety, not only for the officers, but for the public. We had to get our people in place. The laws had already been broken. The violation had already been committed. But before we just rush in there with, without any plan or any tactics, we got our people in place. We got our mobile field force in place. We went in and then we arrested the violators. So the protest had already been deemed violent prior to that happening. It's real easy to Monday morning quarterback a video. It's really easy to sit back and say you would have done something differently. But when you add in the tension, the anxiety levels of not only protesters but officers, you have to make a quick decision to make those arrests. They had been given multiple warnings about what was going to happen. We'd asked them to disperse. Their initial cause was to get onto the interstate system and block it off. We were able to keep that from happening, but in doing so, they flooded into the neighborhood, and there were a lot of houses in that area. It was a residential district, so the incident commander at the time made that decision, and we felt like it was the right one made at the time.
So I asked the chief, would he do anything differently? His answer, no. Over the course of the last 48 hours, more than 200 people have been arrested. And Elaine, this police department has been criticized for appearing more like a military than a police department. And so I asked the chief today, what do you say to those people who say the Baton Rouge Police Department simply looks like they're bringing a gun to a knife fight, as if they're overdoing it? And he acknowledged and revealed to us that the protests that have happened over the last 4 to 5 days and the use of the tactical gear employed by the Baton Rouge Police Department is the first time this department has used that type of equipment in a real-life situation.
Wow, really interesting information there, David. So the question is, you have been there, you and your crew have recorded some of these confrontations that have taken place. What is it that police are bracing for in the hours and days ahead?
Well, let me tell you, just beyond me, actually, where we are at the police department, there's probably more than 24 law enforcement officials from around the state. The guys here at Baton Rouge Police Department are exhausted. They have been going for about 4 to 5 days straight. In fact, I met the officer who had his teeth knocked out 24 hours ago by a protester who allegedly hurled a plastic bottle at him and knocked out a couple of his front teeth because it was filled with water. And he was still on the job because he said he didn't want to leave his brothers by themselves. The protests have been, so what I was saying about that is these extra resources from around the state are bringing in to backfill the exhausted officers. Elaine, the protests have been in large part very peaceful, but there have been some tense, volatile moments. And some of the protesters will tell you they're doing nothing wrong. But the bottom line, we've observed it. They've walked out on the street, they've obstructed roadways, they've thrown rocks and bottles at the police. So laws have been broken. But when you look at it in totality, the governor will tell you, the police chief will tell you, it could have been a lot worse. They are maintaining the peace when you look at the total scenario. And as of tonight, no protests are planned. But every day, usually nothing is planned, and then all of a sudden it turns out that something sparks up. Last night, they tried to get onto the interstate, according to police, and that's when that confrontation happened in downtown. There's nothing for the rest of the week. I'll end by telling you this. We've confirmed that Alton Sterling's funeral will be on Friday, and it will be held at Southern University in Baton Rouge.
All right. David Begnaud in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. David, thank you so much.
You bet.